Get that. Excellent. Okay, so we may have some people joining us, but I'm going to kick this off by introducing Chief of Police from South Pasadena, Brian Solinsky, who is going to introduce some of his team that's on the call and some of the other support agencies. And then what I thought we would do is let them each kind of give a brief overview of what they do and what services they provide. And then we'll morph into more of a dialogue of how to prevent crime in your own business, what happens if there is something that happens that needs attention, and what can you as businesses do to help each other and support yourselves. So Brian, I'm going to let you just kick it off. Thank you for being here this morning.
Well, great. Thank you, Lori. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see you all. I see some familiar faces and some new faces as well. For those that don't know me, my name is Brian Solinsky, and I'm the police chief in South Pasadena. I've been in this community for, almost 31 years now. So it's been a long time, and the community's definitely changed since I first got here. So we're dealing with a lot of new issues, crime issues, social issues, and my goal for today is really to be a listening session, and also to provide some resources and give some insight on what the police department can do to help you as business owners or community members to tackle some of the problems that you may be facing. I'd like to do some introductions first. Shannon, if you could introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending. My name is Shannon Robledo. I've been with the city of South Pasadena for approximately 30 years as well as Chief Solinsky. My current position is a lieutenant, and I oversee patrol, detectives, the homeless outreach program.
Great, thank you. Tanya? Is she on there? I think she dropped off. Okay, well, she'll come back. How about Leah?
See Tanya unmuted. I can let her
Oh,
go
there we
first.
go.
Hi, I'm Tanya Britton. I am the acting management analyst for the police department, and it's nice to meet you all.
Hi, and I'm Leah Demarest. I work in the housing division for the city of South Pasadena. So I collaborate with the police department on homelessness initiatives and work on other things related to housing.
And I think we have Sam on from the COG.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I work for the Sam Peterson. I'm an analyst at the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments. We're an intergovernmental agency. We're entirely grant funded, and we really try to provide some regional connective tissue for cities to provide a greater voice, either at the county level or the state level, and advocate for funding for regional programs and also policy change to the extent that we can make that happen. So I'm also program manager for a program that South Pasadena participates in called the CARE program. It's a mobile crisis program I can talk more about if there's any questions. And I have the other kind of relevant program in our we have Samantha Piedra from our side as well. She can introduce herself quickly.
Hi, everyone. I'm sort of new already to the COG. I've been here for 6 months already. I am a senior management analyst, and I oversee the outreach programs that South Pasadena participates in through our partnership with Lakota. And I'll briefly talk about that later on today. Thank you.
And Chief, we have some members from Lakota here as well. I don't know if you want to introduce them now, or they can kind of hop on.
No, if the Lakota and the members of SGB CARE can introduce themselves, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, maybe we start with Mary. I see your bright smile.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us. My name's Mary Kemp, and I am the program manager for SGB CARE. And we work, of course, in partnership with SGB COG, and we are represented in South Pass as a mobile crisis mental health provider. And I do have my CARE team on this morning's call, both Jordan and Vanessa. And we are available for any input, questions, any clarification, and we're pleased to be here. Thank you so much.
Great. I think I got everybody. If there's anybody else that I missed, raise your hand, let me know, and we'll come back to you. But the whole purpose is some of the business owners and community members might be wondering, what are all these government entities doing on this meeting? And it really is about resources. So in South Pasadena, we're a great community. We accomplish a lot, but we need help. And our partners in the San Gabriel Valley, be it the COG, LACADA, San Gabriel Valley Care, these are all government entities that we use as a resource to deal with our homeless issues, our issues dealing with addiction, mental health, and as business owners, probably 90% of the questions I receive as chief of police is, what are we doing with the social problems that we're seeing, and how do we fix them? And, I wish I had the answer to how we fix it. I'd certainly be a millionaire, but it is certainly not just a police problem. It's not just a government problem. It really is an entire community problem. That how do we fix these things? How do we come together? And then most importantly is, what is we as South Pasadena, how do we want to fix it? How do we want to solve these issues? And that is really the big debate, because I think every community has a different perspective on it. But I'm going to share my screen, and this is the first time I've done this, so please bear with me. Let's see. Can all of you see the my screen with the PowerPoint point in time count?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to touch on the homeless and mental health side of things first. As I mentioned, that's majority of what I hear from business owners. So all of us have seen an uptick in the number of homeless in Los Angeles County, certainly in South Pasadena, like we've never seen before. Part of that is due to, obviously, there's national issues, there's economic issues, there's dependency issues, but how does that affect South Pasadena? Well, one of the leading causes I think we see is just simply where we're located. We're right next to Los Angeles, which is really the nucleus of Southern California in terms of homelessness and mental health issues. In January, and where's the date here? We just did it, January 23rd, South Pasadena did our point in time count. The point in time count is where we go out into the community and we try to identify and count the number of homeless that use South Pasadena or call South Pasadena home. And that number has remained fairly stable over the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, anywhere between 10 to 15. The problem that we have with that is when we turn that number into the county, they put a multiplier on it. And depending on where we contact that homeless individual, whether it's a tent, it's a car, or walking on the street, the county puts a multiplier to that anywhere between 1 to 2, 2.5, and they come up with a total number. And that multiplier is put in place to determine how many we may have missed. So that's what they're saying is the average. And in the 2023 count, just to give you some facts, there were roughly 715,000 people in Los Angeles County that were experiencing homelessness. That's just Los Angeles County. If we want to look at California as a whole, I think the latest I heard was that 1/3 of all homeless in the United States are living in California. And someone from the COG or LACADA may chime in with some better statistics, but that's just a rough estimate there. And Los Angeles County from last year has experienced a 10% increase. Now, consider 75,000 homeless, but we have approximately 21,000 beds or shelters in Los Angeles County. That's a big delta. And the question really becomes is how do we mitigate that? How do we find shelter and beds and the care for that many people? So I'll go to the next slide here. One of the challenges in law enforcement in enforcing some of our homeless ordinances, specifically camping, is a Ninth Circuit decision that came out a couple years ago, and it's Martin versus the city of Boise, Idaho. And basically it said, the courts came down and said that it's cruel and unusual punishment to enforce an anti-sleeping ordinance for the homeless or the unhoused, because sleeping it's a human function and everyone needs that. So that really challenged law enforcement. And then how do we enforce our homeless anti-camping ordinances? What do we do to mitigate that? So it came to the point to where we even had some homeless that were camping in our city hall courtyard in front of our police station, and it's really been challenging. So there was a federal judge in Los Angeles County that's kind of working with a number of the different law enforcement agencies and homeless advocacy groups that said, when you do these point in time counts, in order to enforce your homeless overnight sleeping ordinances, you need to provide up to 70% beds or shelters for the at-risk population. And so that's when we take our 15 homeless that we counted, we add the multiplier, and typically we come up with those multipliers roughly about 50 homeless for South Pasadena. And so we would need to provide beds for 70% of those. Here comes the problem: is not only do we need a budget for that as a city, but then we need to try to find the beds for them. And if we're already, I think he said 21,000 beds for 75,000 people, we're competing with all the other cities for the same number of beds. I think the closest shelter to us is Union Station, and Union Station is serviced by the city of Pasadena, South Pasadena, and some of the neighboring, I'm sorry, 1 second, some of the neighboring communities. So we're all competing for the same beds, the same pool of funding. It really becomes challenging for us. There's other decisions that came down, as you see on the screen, a case in San Francisco that was fairly recent. San Francisco tried to circumvent the Ninth Circuit's decision that they were trying to clean up camps and a number of things along their public streets, and the Ninth Circuit came back and voted 2-1 to put an injunction against that. So, and there's a number of lawsuits that are pending. So there's really some challenges when we're talking about doing enforcement of homeless, whether they're camping on the streets, as we've probably all seen in our own communities, or in public spaces. And it's really hampered law enforcement in our abilities. So one thing South Pasadena has done is we've partnered with some of the government entities that we mentioned and that have introduced themselves: the COG, LACADA, LA County Department of Mental Health. How do we solve South Pasadena's problems? That's our first step. Is we don't want to, we're not looking to solve the world's problems. We just want to solve South Pasadena's. And they have been a tremendous resource. One of our programs is a co-response model with LACADA, and that is when there is a mental health crisis in South Pasadena, it is not just law enforcement going. We're going in with LACADA, which consists of a clinician and other types of assistance there, and they really provide the long-term help that some of these people need. The goal is to get them off the street, to provide them help, and to end the cycle of homelessness. And I'll be honest with you, in terms of law enforcement, our hands are really tied, not only for the law enforcement side of things of what we can enforce, but simply we just do not have the tools, and we are not the experts in mental health or homelessness or even addiction. You know, we have limited tools as law enforcement that we can use. Law enforcement was never designed to be that bridge to bridge that gap. You know, our tools are simply enforcement of the law, and a lot of these people simply need help. They need to get off the street. They need counseling. They need mental health services. They need medications and whatnot. And law enforcement is just not designed to do that. And that's where the county and the other nonprofits and LACADA come into partnership, is they can provide those resources that law enforcement can't. The other side of that is we're not putting someone into the criminal justice system when they don't necessarily need to. And LACADA also, along with their partners, can do the long-term care where law enforcement can't. Typically, we can spend up to a couple hours with an individual, but then there's no follow-up. And I think that's just nature of our job in law enforcement. It's where we fall short, and we can lean on our partners to help pick up that gap. Looking at South Pasadena Police specifically, what are we doing to address the homeless issue besides partnering with these other agencies? Year to date, we have, from January 23 to January 24, we've brought in overtime positions with our officers 107 times just to address our unhoused concerns. And that includes either walking through the Mission and Fair Oaks districts, or riding a what we call a T3, which is like a three-wheeled scooter, patrolling the Mission Meridian Parking District lot, or the Gold Line, just to be visible, walking the beat to introduce ourselves to residents and business owners, just to know we're there. It's just that extra visibility. But in that same time period, just to give you some statistics here, we've had over 815 calls that are directly related to homeless activity. That does not include crimes. That is just the, someone doesn't look right, they look like they need help. There's someone that's homeless that is asleep in the parks, or something of that nature, something that does not equate to a crime. So when you start adding the crimes, we don't classify our crimes by who commits them. So it's really hard to track those statistics. But as you can imagine, most of our calls are related to homelessness and some sort of criminal element. So that 815 calls for service would go up dramatically if we were able to capture that. A lot of times I get questions from the community as far as what can I do as a business owner? What can I do as a citizen when a crime does occur? And when a crime occurs that's a felony, law enforcement has the ability, and this is by law, we can go in there, we can investigate, we can make arrests if we need to. If we believe a crime is going to be committed, has been committed, or is being committed, we can arrest someone and investigate that crime. On the flip side, when it's a misdemeanor or a lesser crime, the law is very specific and really limits what law enforcement can do. And that is, we cannot arrest a misdemeanor that did not occur in our presence. It has to be the person who witnessed the crime, has to be the person who's making the arrest. And what that comes down to is a private person's or citizen's arrest. They're the same thing. And I know, just even in my own private life, nobody really wants to get involved. It can be scary. It can take time out of your schedule. It can be a nuisance for you to have to get involved. And I completely understand that. This is not new. This is really, if you ask me, kind of a flaw in the way the law is written. But there is limited tools the police officers can use when it comes to a private person's arrest. So for instance, and I'm going to talk about the homeless in this case, we've had a number of assaults that have occurred in the Mission Meridian District with homeless and businesses. And the police will show up, and the assaults don't amount to a felony. They're a misdemeanor in nature. Well, they didn't occur in my presence or the officer's presence, so we cannot arrest them. And we have to rely on the business owner or the victim of the assault to press charges. And a lot of times those witnesses and or victims don't want to press charges. And I completely understand that. There's that fear level involved. There's the time. There's all those things that play a factor into it. But when that doesn't occur, the only thing that's left for law enforcement to do is to warn the offender and try to ask them to move away from the business and not come back. And that's only as successful as that suspect is willing to obey our commands. There's no legal authority we have to tell them not to come back. It is more of a recommendation. Now, there's a distinct correlation with the powers that law enforcement have as do a private citizen. And I think a lot of people would be surprised to know private citizens and law enforcement, when making an arrest, we're really under the same guidelines. So a private citizen, you have to witness the offense for you to make a private arrest against that individual. So if you did not witness it, you're not entitled by law to make that arrest. It has to be someone who witnessed it or who is a victim to it. When an officer is on scene and an individual says, I want to make a private person's arrest, the officer is mandated to fill out some paperwork. They'll have you sign it, saying that you're making the private person's arrest, and they will take that person into custody. And here's the caveat: unless the officer knows that there is no probable cause to make the arrest. So just because someone is doing something that you may not like and you say, I want to make a private person's arrest, unless there is probable cause, and probable cause means that you believe that that person is currently committing a crime, will commit a crime, or has committed a crime, that's probable cause. Then there is no, if those elements aren't met and there is no crime, we are obligated not to make the arrest. So the officer will guide individuals through that, though. He'll tell you, hey, you don't have enough here, or absolutely, that's a crime, and you certainly have the authority to make an arrest if you want to. Now, when we make an arrest, what we used to do, and I'm talking about pre-social justice changes and challenges, is we used to take the individual into custody and we take them to a local jail. We contract with Alhambra, and they would be booked and processed in there. With a lot of the changes since COVID 2020 and social justice movements and policies within the district attorney's office, we have been given direction by the courts, by the district attorney's office, that a lot of these crimes now, they still count as an arrest, but they're cited and released at the scene. So a lot of the custody facilities will not take individuals now that don't commit felonies. Or the district attorney's office has looked at these as minor crimes and are not prosecuting. That's a whole different issue, and I don't want to get into that. That's just more of a challenge that law enforcement has to deal with these days. Now, how do you as a private citizen make an arrest? Well, first of all, call the police. If you have any questions, regardless of whether it's a crime, if there is someone that is bothering your customers, bothering you as an individual at your home, causing some issues, please call the police department. Allow us to make the determination if it's a crime or not, and we'll advise you and we'll help walk you through that. But if in fact it is a crime, we'll give you your options of whether or not you have the right to make an arrest. We can walk you through that. We can't advise you whether or not to do it. That is a legal opinion that you have to make yourself. But we can at least walk you through processes and answer some legal questions without regard to whether or not you should or should not do it. We'll have you inform the suspect that you plan on arresting them. You indicate your authority that you're making a citizen's arrest. We'll have you sign a form, and then we'll go ahead and process the individual. The only caveat to that is, if you decide to make an arrest, we ask that you do it fairly soon, because the longer we wait, you may lose the authority to make an arrest. For instance, if you're going to make an arrest for someone that is maybe assaulted you or is bothering your customers in some way, shape, or form, and you come back a day or two later, well, that threat is no longer there, and that really complicates the process. So we just ask that, hey, if you're going to call the police and you're going to decide to do it, is to do it as soon as possible. I'm not telling you not to, I'm just saying that that is a concern. When you call the police, and this is regardless of any crime, so the private person's arrest portion of this could be related to either homelessness or mental health issues, so to speak, but it also relates to trespassing, shoplifting, or any other type of crime. In the same token, when you do call the police, our police dispatch is going to ask you a series of questions. And I know at times it can be challenging because they're asking a lot of questions. And as a victim, you're thinking, well, I just want the police here. I can explain that when I get there. But keep in mind, when we're asking these questions, they are designed so that we can, one, get the most information as possible so that we know either A, who to look for, B, what the officers can plan on dealing with when they get there so they have the right tools with them. And then 3 is that we can provide the right resources. So when you call the police, we know ahead of time, do we need to call Lakota and bring a mental health team to meet us? Do we need to bring additional officers? Do we need to bring other resources? So it really helps law enforcement, and it actually speeds up the process of solving the problem overall. We're fortunate being in South Pasadena. One, it is a small community and it is fairly safe when you consider our surrounding jurisdictions. And our response time to a call is typically 2 to 5 minutes. So that's a pretty significant response time. But having said that, that response time can vary because we all are a small agency, that if we are backed up for calls for service, we will get an officer out there as soon as possible, but we also prioritize our calls. So if there are calls that involve violence, those are our priority. If there's life-saving measures that need to be performed, those are our priority. However, as soon as we can clear those, we will get to your call as soon as possible. And fortunately, because of the type of community we have, we don't get backed up on those calls very often. I would ask that anytime that you call the police, ask to file a report or at least document. I think there's two different terms here. When people think of filing a report, they think of the police officer actually writing a paper report. For our purposes in law enforcement here in South Pasadena, a report to us is just documentation, whether it's on paper or our dispatcher has entered your information, entered the location of the offense, and all the parties involved. It's just something so we can gather statistics. But what we use those statistics for is not just reporting. We also can go back and look at trends. So if we have an individual that is committing a number of crimes along a certain district that maybe hasn't been arrested over a period of time, that may influence how we proceed in the future, or it may lead to enhanced charges later. And we collect all that data so that when the opportunity presents itself, we can go back and look historically what kind of crime or what kind of trends are we seeing in a certain neighborhood. So I do ask that, hey, please be a partner with us and call, let us know. If you don't report it or if you don't call us to let us know, we may not know what's going on. And a police department is only as good as its relationship with the community. And you certainly are our community, and we value you and we value your opinion. So we want to hear from you. One important thing is if you can take video or pictures, please do so. That helps so much. And we have the technology's there these days, and we rely on it significantly. I don't know if any of you know, but over the weekend we had a shooting at Garfield Park. And by that evening, we were able to take someone into custody. But it really was through surveillance and video cameras that we were able to crack that case. And I know a lot of businesses have alarms and whatnot, but I also know for the sake of this room, we come across a lot of businesses that have old alarms or old video cameras that don't work. And there has been some really good police work and some great cases that have been challenging to solve because the systems that were in place just weren't maintained. So it's a good insurance policy for your businesses or your homes even. If you have those video cameras or that capability, that you make sure that they're working. I can remember years ago, we had an incident at a local restaurant and they had video cameras, but the video cameras hadn't been cleaned in years and they were right above the fryers. And, they were covered in grease. So all I saw were smudges of something. So, take the time to invest in your business or your home and make sure those things are working. They're really, really helpful, especially today's day and age. If you come across, and this doesn't matter, what they're dealing with, anybody that's dangerous, it's kind of common sense is that you keep your distance, try not to be by yourself. Use a calm voice. We don't want to agitate that person because we don't know what type of mental state they're in. And law enforcement, I'm sorry, apologize. In law enforcement, we say, the hands kill. And what we mean by that is always watch someone's hands because you don't know what they're doing. If they're in their pockets, you don't know if they have a weapon. You don't know what they're intending to do. If you can't see their hands, do they have a knife? Do they have a pencil? We don't know. So keep your distance and try to walk away safely, but keep your eye on them as well. Call the police as soon as you can and give a clear description. That's where I talked about the dispatcher asking those questions. She's going to ask those questions. And if you're automatically in that surveillance mode, you're going to pick up the things that you need to add. You're going to, hey, what color hair do they have? What color shirt? What color pants? And in law enforcement, our dispatchers, we train them to ask from the top down. So from the hat to the hair to the facial features and all the way down. And that's kind of how we go. Can you use self-defense methods? Yeah, you actually can, but you're under the same legal guidelines that law enforcement are, and that is you have to be dealing with a threat, and you have to be able to justify using self-defense methods, whether it's pepper spray or a kick or whatnot. Otherwise, just like law enforcement, the private citizen can actually be charged with excessive force and assault. So I don't want to scare anybody. I don't want to, certainly push you away from defending yourself, because that is reasonable to defend yourself if you have to. And we've certainly had a number of incidents where citizens and business owners have had to defend themselves. But I just want you to be aware of when you can use self-defense. And those are the times when you can. When you're being assaulted or you feel that your life or your safety is in danger and there is an imminent threat, you absolutely can. You just have to be able to describe it and explain why you felt that you were in danger. So having said that, I'm going to take my screen off here, bring everybody back. Let's see. Give me 1 second here. Okay, I'm having technical difficulty. Can you all see my face yet?
Not yet.
No, okay. Your screen sharing, let me take it off.
I can help you.
Well, Chief's
Stop
taking
sharing.
care of
Okay.
that.
How
There
about
we
now?
go. Yes, great,
All right.
thank you.
Okay, I'm back. I apologize. Okay, so I know I've talked a lot about, through the PowerPoint on what we're dealing with in terms of homelessness and then some crime issues. But I would like to take some questions from any of you if you have any. So if you do, please put your comments in the chat group and we'll get to you. But in the meantime, I'd also like to ask the members of the Lakota team if they could share kind of what their roles and responsibilities are in the community and how they assist the police and our business owners as well.
Good morning. Thank you, Chief. This is Mary Kemp again with the CARE team. What I wanted to make certain of is that I introduced our program manager for the outreach side of the agency, and his name is Will Gray. I wanted Will to say hello and introduce. We differentiate between the homeless outreach side and the mobile crisis mental health team. So there's a distinction there, but Will, if you would introduce yourself and say a few words about what your team is doing in South Pasadena.
Hi, everyone. My name is William Gray, and I am the program manager for the outreach team that is in South Pass on Mondays from 9 to 3:30. So what our goal is housing, right? It's housing with the unhoused folks who are in the community. We are proactively looking for unhoused folks, but also responding to referrals from our city partners as well as law enforcement to see if for those who might be willing to accept services. But the ultimate goal again is housing. With that also comes if someone has other needs, we will also look into maybe helping them if substance misuse is in their story, connecting in terms of those services, mental health services, as well as meeting their basic needs.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I see some questions, and the first one is, I'm sorry, did I?
No, go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Perfect.
What should you do when you have a homeless person in your store? Well, if they're in your store and they're not there legitimately shopping and you would like them to leave, remember, you have the right to refuse service. If you are uncomfortable with approaching them, And again, that goes back to that, what's that safety mechanism, right? You know, if you can't see their hands, if you're by yourself, if you are, let's face it, we all have that moment where we think something's going to happen and the hair on the back of your neck stands up. If you're just nervous, call the police. We want to know about it. Like I said, most of the time we will be there between 2 to 5 minutes. And if we have someone available, we may even have someone walking that, doing one of those overtime details that I was talking about, and have them present. They could be there even faster. We'll go in there, we'll talk to them. If you want them to leave your store, we will ask them to leave. If they refuse to leave, then now we're escalating it to trespassing. The only thing we would advise you is, remember, is if they're suffering a mental health issue, it may be something where we just need to tell them that they need to move on, as opposed to introducing them to the criminal justice system. But the nice thing is if they are suffering from mental health issues, we can call the LACADA and they can come out and they can take over and offer resources and services. If they're experiencing homelessness, we have resources available. As Mary mentioned, there's two different kind of paths here. There's the mental health, and then there's the unhoused side of it. But we also have that unhoused component to where we can offer long-term goals, try to find them immediate housing, and then ultimately the goal is to transition to long-term housing. Along that way, there's counselors. So we have a number of resources and partners and tools that we can use. While the PD doesn't have them directly, we are able to get them pretty fast. So just to give you an example, when we call for mental health services or homeless outreach, they can usually be here within 10 to 15 minutes. And that, while the police department's there, we're not going to leave. We're going to stay there till one of those resources get there. And so we can very quickly escort them out of your store. We can talk to them. We can offer them some resources, and then the mobile crisis team will show up, or one of the outreach teams, and then they'll take over from there. So that's kind of how that works. How would an ambassador guide team help while waiting for the police? That's kind of a new concept. I know they do it in Pasadena. South Pasadena, I put it in my my PowerPoint because I did want to talk about it. It's something that South Pasadena we're looking at. We haven't implemented it yet, but really right now it would be the police department. But what we're looking at implementing once we become fully staffed is a citizens on patrol team, and then also which is really basically the same thing, and that's taking some retirees that maybe have a desire to serve in public safety, that still want to do something, but really aren't quite to the level of law enforcement. They would be in uniform, they would drive a city vehicle, and they are doing things like business checks, going and introducing themselves to the community. They're doing traffic control, maybe vacation checks at homes and those type of things. Really some benign types of duties, but are not the uniformed officer response. You know, they're not the armed response. And in situations like this, depending on the level of the call, when you would call the police department, if it is someone like Sue said, hey, if there's just a homeless person in my store, what do I do? We can get that ambassador out there, or that what we will call a citizen on patrol, and have them kind of be the mediator till either law enforcement can get there and or one of the resource teams, mental health or crisis intervention teams. And that kind of bridges that gap until we can get all the resources there. And plus, especially with law enforcement, as I mentioned earlier, if we're on a call for service and maybe it's a violent call or something, it can be anywhere from a 5-minute delay to an hour delay. But for you as the caller, you want someone there right away. So this will help bridge that gap. And that's something that we've had on our books. I really want to implement it. I've got a number of residents that are really interested in it. I just need the staffing to be able to manage that program. I'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward. Ms. Hodgson said, how quickly does SGB COG respond? I think I covered that. Typically, it's about 10 to 15 minutes. Right now, and it's actually not the COG, it's LACADA. The COG is more the government entity that, well, Sam, I'll have you explain that.
Yeah.
Better I am.
Well, I would just, yeah, the chief is right with the average response time there. I would just add that, unlike the police department, which is, of course, 24/7 service, our funding is limited, as mentioned. So there's program hours operating during Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays in South Pasadena, from 8 a.m. To 6:30, 7 o'clock. And I would also note that, as the chief mentioned, it is a co-response model operating in South Pasadena. So while the police can respond in 2 to 4 minutes, I think you said, chief, the care team takes a little bit longer. They could be responding to a call in Arcadia. And if they are on a call, the calls can sometimes take hours. If they're trying to get somebody in a crisis stabilization bed at a mental health facility, they can sometimes be on calls for 4 or 5+ hours. So, but that said, our average response time is about 15 minutes, which we're particularly proud of. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Sam. So you touched on something really important, is South Pasadena partners with a couple of different cities in this pilot program, where we are doing this co-response model. There's some different talks about a solo response, and South Pasadena is really geared towards that co-response, because we feel as a police department, as a city, we have a duty to be there for our residents and for our community members, which you are all a part of, our business community, so that we are not leaving someone there that, whenever Licata gets there to help you. We want an officer there right away to alleviate that problem from you. So we will stay there. And if one of our resource partners is not able to come right away, the police department will then take the issue, and we can do the same thing. We can drive those individuals to a facility. We can get them the mental health they need. It's not the preferred way, because we prefer to keep our police officers in the city and doing the job that they need to do, being proactive and enforcing laws. But if needed, we will go back to the old model, which is the law enforcement officer will not only deal with the issue, but they will transport them to the medical facility or wherever they need to go to provide them the help that they need. Sue says, I've had the same Black woman with mental health issues in my store at least 3 times. She talks to my inventory and sits on the floor and eventually does leave. So that is one of the biggest issues that we are having, is we're dealing with the same individuals over and over and over again. When someone is suffering a mental health issue, the challenge for law enforcement, and the same for Licata, is that we cannot forcibly take them. We can offer them the resources. And keep in mind, they may not be in the right mental capacity, so the decisions that they're making may not seem reasonable. But we do our best to offer them resources so that they're appealing and they take it. Sometimes that means over and over again by building relationships with them and building the trust, whether it's us or even our partners are a little bit better at it, simply because they're not law enforcement. And that's really what makes the relationship between us work, and we can play off of each other. So if someone doesn't trust law enforcement, we can refer them to a non-uniform person, and hopefully they can gain their trust a little bit better and get them to take those resources. The only time we can forcibly take someone is when they're a danger to themselves, a danger to others, and that is what we call a 5150. I mean, it's a common term a lot. It's the 5150 code of the Welfare and Institution Code, and that is when we can take someone for a 72-hour mental health evaluation. We have a number of facilities around that we can do that with. Huntington Hospital, Los Encinas, there's probably a lot more I'm forgetting, but that is the only time we can actually forcibly take someone to go get mental health treatment. So I know there was a woman at the library that was camping there for a period of time during the day, and we had some issues with her. There's certainly people, as Sue mentioned, the regulars, as I'll call them, that we continue to go out on day in and day out. We try as much as we can to alleviate that and make those resources available and appealing. But unless they are meeting one of those dimensions, it is really challenging for us. And the more calls we get on them, the easier it becomes for us kind of track behaviors. And if we see a pattern of escalating threats or something of that nature, sometimes that makes it easier for us to place them in that mental health hold and bring them to a facility. Now, having said that, once they get to the facility, it is up to the doctors to determine whether or not and how long that treatment lasts. Sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, there's competing interests as far as beds available, spaces available, not only with shelters, but with medical facilities, and there's funding issues. So I've had some very good cases and candidates for mental health evaluations that didn't stay the entire 72 hours because a doctor felt that they didn't need that long-term care. On the flip side, I've had some really great doctors and interactions with people. And then we've also used our connections with Licata and LA County Mental Health, where an individual certainly needed much longer care. And we were able to get the resources and get them in the right facilities. So sometimes it's a bit of luck and hit and miss. The important thing is that we keep trying and that we don't give up on it.
Yeah, and Chief, and if I can just add up for the Sue who's saying she has someone who talks to her inventory and sits on the floor, something like that might not register as emergency you would necessarily call 911 for. And if it's during program hours, you can call that dispatch line that I think the chief put in the chat at the beginning, 626-403-7297. That's a great candidate. That's a great call for the care team. I will say, that first call might not necessarily yield a lot of results. A lot of time, the team has to build a rapport with that individual, build trust. But that happens over time. And the goal is really to be able to get a client like that connected to longer term services.
Perfect. Thank you. Samar had a couple of questions, and I think I answered one. She said, do the mentally ill have the right to refuse help? As of right now, yes, they do, unless they are meeting one of those criteria that they're a danger to themselves or other. Now, she also, right below that, she said, what about if they threaten to kill or harm us or our customers? Absolutely. Now we're talking about something totally different. The mere fact that they're threatening violence, now we've escalated to a crime. But we also have to weigh in the fact that they're mentally ill. Do we necessarily want to introduce them into the criminal justice system? I'm going to say that's an individual case-by-case basis because there's too many hypotheticals. But it gives us as law enforcement, now we got a little more leeway and some extra room to use the tools that we need to try to find a resolution to this. So depending on what they say, what they do, we could go criminal, or now we probably have more of an opportunity to do the 72-hour mental health evaluation. And that, I don't want to say one thing or the other is better. I think it really just depends on the individual and the circumstances. But it definitely does give us more room to call in additional resources and to exercise our judgment a little easier and apply some different laws and techniques. So I hope that, I know that's a really generic response, but it really does depend on the individual and what they've said. And either way, I would hope that you would please call us because we will send an officer down and let them make that evaluation and then work with you to answer any questions or provide you resources that you need so that you and your customers feel safe. Most importantly, we want you and your customers to feel safe. It appears that a lot of our issues with the mentally ill are people coming off the metro. 100%. Is South Pasadena doing anything to monitor the area once the ill person steps off the platform? Yes. When we get calls for service, this is a little more of an in-depth response. The metro is patrolled by the sheriff's department. And the sheriff's department, last I checked, they had 2 to 4 deputies, depending on their staffing, from Los Angeles border to Azusa. So they could be anywhere on that line. If we call them, they'll come, depending on how busy they are. We recognize in South Pasadena that, look, we need to protect our community as best as we can. We don't staff an extra officer for the Gold Line, but we do realize that a lot of crime comes from it. So when we have the availability, we will either hire overtime, or we ask our officers every day to do extra patrols in that area just because we know it's a hot spot of activity. But we also, as I mentioned, we do overtime positions there. One thing I would ask of our business owners, if any of you have watched City Council, last Wednesday, they indicated that there was potentially a citywide deficit. One of the things public safety does, we have an overtime budget. We are woefully understaffed. I think I am down probably 20 positions throughout the police department, both professional and in our field services. So the only way to make up for that is through overtime. So we have, I want to say, we have a couple months left in our fiscal year, and we are almost depleted through our overtime budget. A lot of that comes from staffing, but the other half of that comes from positions like our homeless outreach detail. That's an overtime position where we send someone out to the Mission Meridian District to cruise along Fair Oaks Avenue and just be visible. We field 3 officers for the entire city every day, plus a supervisor. When you get on a call for service, let's say it's a domestic issue, that takes 2 officers out of the field right away. So we only have 1 available. So that extra overtime position is really helpful for us. As we come into the new budget cycle, which is, let's see, we'll probably start working on the budget here in the next month or so, getting ready for the fiscal year in July. I would encourage you, if you want to see more police, if it's important to you, please come out and support us. Please send in a written response to the council so they know where your priorities are. A lot of times they hear about roads and streets and those type of things, and those are important, don't get me wrong, but there's a whole other side to it as well. So when our overtime budget is cut because of shortages in the city, this is a direct result, as we can't provide those services, especially in times like now. Law enforcement is not a popular profession, and we are feeling the pinch in South Pasadena. We are not getting the applicants we used to get, and we are woefully understaffed. We're not asking for more people. We're just trying to get up to where we used to be 10 years ago. And it's just it is not just South Pasadena. It is law enforcement across the nation. And I share with my colleagues all the time, we're experiencing the same deficits. So having said that, let's see. Shannon Robledo, our lieutenant, has put a resource guide, the link to it, with all the resources available. And if at any time you lose that link, or you want additional information, please feel free to call the police department. We are happy to come out and talk to you. I think that's kind of the charm of South Pasadena and being the agency that we are, is we will make time for you. We will come to your business, we'll talk to you. We can go over some safety plans. We can make recommendations for your business as far as what may prevent shoplifting, anything you need in terms of safety and the community, we're happy to provide. Diane says it appears a lot of our issues. Okay, I think I asked that about the metro. And then she says, what would happen if we use pepper spray if a guy comes into your store? Just a question, not planning on using it. Just curious. Hey, that's a great question, because as we see today, I think the majority of people I come in contact with, from business owners and residents, I think they're starting to feel the pinch, and they're seeing that the community is not the same as it used to be. Let's face it, all across Los Angeles, crime is up, right? So pepper spray is a great alternative. Tasers, those type of things, those are readily available to members of the public. You can buy them anymore. You can buy them at, I think CVS sells pepper spray. The only thing, the warning that I give is, you are under the same requirements as law enforcement in using self-defense tools, is that you have to be able to justify it. So what I mean by that is, if you feel that you are in imminent danger of being attacked, can you use it? Absolutely. You just have to articulate that when the officer comes out there. You can defend yourself. You don't have to be a victim. You don't have to take a punch first. You just have to articulate of why you felt you were in danger. And as long as you can do that from a legal perspective, you should be good. Again, my disclaimer is every case is unique, and I don't want to give a blanket statement, but that is generally the laws. is just like law enforcement. We have to be able to articulate why we use a use of force or some sort of technique. You would have to do the same as a private citizen. And I don't mean that to discourage you. It's just something to think about. But I do like the fact that you're at least thinking about things. I always find that the people, whether even my own family, don't wait for the danger to happen. Don't wait for the earthquake. Plan ahead. You know, have those resources available. So you as a business owner, you know you're going to get the homeless. You know you may get shoplifting. How would you handle these things? And it's a great opportunity for you guys to do some training. Either call us and we'll come down and provide training one-on-one, or bring in someone, train your staff, talk about the what ifs so that you're all informed and you all have a plan. Okay, I think that is the last question. Thank you for this meeting. I have to jump off the call. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. And you would like to see more South Pasadena Police. I appreciate that. We are here absolutely to serve you. And as I mentioned before, we are only as good as our relationship with you. So I look forward to working with you more often. I'm always available. It's unusual, but a chief of police, I try to walk the business districts. Some of you I may have met on my walks. Sometimes I'll pop in and just introduce myself. I think it's important that you put a face to a name and that we have that connection. So if there's anything I can help you with, I am always available and willing and looking for opportunities to get out in the community and meet people. And we can talk about these important issues. There is nothing secret in our community. There's no secret file we have in the police department that we can't talk about. Crime is on the rise. South Pasadena is not in this protective bubble. So we have to prepare and we have to come together and work together so that we can keep South Pasadena and the atmosphere and the flavor of it whole like we want it. That's why we all came to South Pasadena. It's an amazing community. Let's keep it. But we can only do that if we work together. And we can't do it as a police department if we don't hear from you. So having said that, I'll open it up to any other questions, or Lori, if you want to jump in, or any of my partners in there, if they have something to add, by all means, please speak up, because this is a really in-depth topic that we are covering very fast.
I just want to say before we do questions, if people are having to leave, this is being recorded. I will be compiling, we'll be putting it on our website. If you want the link, you can access it through our website or just email us. We can send it to you. And as Shannon said, we'll be compiling these resources. We have a copy of the Business Watch newsletter electronically. So there's resources that we can help you with. And I appreciate everybody on this call. And again, as the chief said, if we have further comments or questions or information from any of the resources that are on the call, jump right in.
Diane said that having street ambassadors or our citizens on patrol would be a huge help. Absolutely. I think it's a great program. When I first started my law enforcement career, we had a similar program at that agency, and it was tremendous. It was a force multiplier for the police department because for the non-urgent calls, we could send these individuals out. But it was also a great help for the community, because not only do you want someone there fast, you may not necessarily need a police officer. You just need someone from an official capacity to be there to kind of mitigate the problem, provide resources or whatnot. So we are definitely looking at implementing something like that. And I think it would do very well in South Pasadena. One thing I did want to say is you will see myself, as I mentioned, and some of my officers, but some of our partners that are here today with Lakata and whatnot, going to businesses and introducing themselves. We want you to know what resources are available to you. We want you to know who we are. So if you see us, please stop by, wave, but don't be surprised also if we just knock on your door and show up at your business to say hello and see how we can help you. So with that, I don't see any other hands or questions. So I just want to say thank you for allowing me to be here today. I truly appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you all, hopefully out on the street and maybe the farmer's market or another business event. And it's certainly my pleasure to be here and to serve you all. So thank you.
Well, and on behalf of the merchants that are here and those that couldn't join us, we really, really appreciate your time, Brian, and all the resources that are on this call. It really is important. And as you said, crime is increasing. And as much as we like to think South Pasadena is a bubble, it isn't. So all of us working together will help. If you don't have your neighbors' phone numbers right next to you or in your phone that you can text if you need help, or somebody's walking down the street, I suggest you do that. Just some of the basic neighborhood watch tools that you use in your neighborhood would be helpful on your block. And we're always available to help as well.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you on the streets.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us, Cindy.
Thank you, Lori.
Bye, Sean.
Thank you, Lori.
Bye-bye.